Hey everybody, welcome to the What is Money Show. I am thrilled to have you here joining me on my mission to help shine light on the corruption of money. Now, a little bit about this show and how it makes money. We are 100% sponsor based, which means that all the revenues we derive come from sponsorships. But I try to be very selective about the sponsors that I work with, specifically trying to choose those who have values well aligned to the values expressed on this show, like freedom, education, self-sovereignty, etc. So what I'm going to do is a few ad reads right here at the top of the show and then a few ad reads in the middle. And I hope you won't skip them. I hope you'll take the time, listen, and see what they have to offer, because again, these are hand-selected sponsors. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Pacific Bitcoin Conference, brought to you by Swan. Now, this is going to be a 2-day event in Los Angeles, November 10th and 11th, 2022. And if you haven't been to a Bitcoin conference yet, I highly recommend it, as there really is no better way to get integrated into the Bitcoin community. Speakers announced so far include Michael Saylor, Lynn Alden, many others. I'll be speaking as well. Michael Saylor is even quoted as saying, "This is going to be the event of the year, so you definitely don't want to miss it." So go to pacificbitcoin.com and use discount code BREEDLOVE to get your tickets today. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Ledn. Ledn lets you do more with your digital assets. For instance, Ledn offers a B2X loan product that lets you leverage your existing Bitcoin to buy even more Bitcoin. Or you can also get traditional Bitcoin collateralized US dollar loans through Ledn as well. Ledn also offers both Bitcoin and USDC denominated savings accounts, letting you generate yield on your digital assets. Recently, Ledn has launched a Bitcoin mortgage product as well that lets you use Bitcoin to buy a home or finance one that you already own. So go to ledn.io, that's LEDN.io today to sign up. Nozomi Hayase, welcome back to the What is Money Show.
Thank you for having me again.
It's great to have you again. I saw you had published a recent written piece titled, "Blessed are the Bitcoiners, they shall inherit the earth." And I had to get you back on to talk about it. We had such a good conversation last time. And just by way of quick introduction for my audience, you are a psychologist and recently a Bitcoin author. You've published a few of these pieces exploring the psychological significance of Bitcoin. And this piece is really interesting. I'll just read the subtitle here. You wrote that the creator of Bitcoin delivered us a path of salvation via proof of work, a process of validating truth on our own, proving that we human beings are made in the image of God. Very potent subtitle.
Yes.
Would you mind just unpacking that a little bit and giving us kind of a synopsis of what this written piece is about?
Yeah. So basically, we hear in the Bitcoin space, we hear the competition between Bitcoin and the CBDS. Basically the central bank's digital currency would be soon rolled out, right? And then these centrally controlled currencies basically have features of surveillance and capacity to keep track of everybody's transactions, and that could be used by what Chinese government is doing already to create kind of technocracy, right? Social credit scoring system. So Bitcoiners, I think, know what is at stake and what they're competing with, and what the CBDS would do to undermine our freedom and sovereignty, right? And I wanted to actually go deeper than just the question of freedom or the surveillance or preservation of privacy, but to really understand what is the nature of this competition. What's happening with the battle, or the race toward global adoption between CBDS, central banks' digital currencies, and Bitcoin. And what I came to understand is that there is deeper philosophical, spiritual dimension to this competition, and the people, the prominent actors behind the rollout of CBD, the central bank's digital currencies, are many of them are pushing forward what they describe as techno-religion. And techno-religion is basically, it's the belief that technology will solve everything, and that technology brings ultimate salvation for humanity, right? And then it's tied with the ideas of transhumanism. And you know, so when I found out about it, then I started to kind of explore the Bitcoin actually provides alternative to that technological utopia, and that it's create a humanistic alternative to technological salvation. So that was kind of like my analysis of what's happening, and I wanted to really to describe you know, what this competition is all about, and in order to do that, I wanted to basically illustrate what the you know, the people who are behind the rollout of central banks' digital currencies are trying to do, and their vision of the world, and then the Bitcoiners' vision of the world. So it's kind of like trying to create this contrast between the two, so that we will be informed about choices, right? So we have one hand their vision, and then on the other we have humanistic vision. And then what's happening in the Bitcoin space is that there is this Renaissance 2.0, Enlightenment 2.0, you know, that the people are, Bitcoiners are kind of excited about this resurgence of art and the revival of the human spirit. And then in some ways, I think that there is this, you know, newly awakened spirituality, or the excitement and engagement in this community to participating in articulating what it means to be human. So one hand we have Renaissance 2.0, Bitcoin Renaissance 2.0, and then on the other hand that we have this, you know, technocratic utopia vision carried by, you know, World Economic Forum, or you know, the people who are behind implementation of the central bank digital currencies.
Yeah, excellent introduction. And I think, as we talked a little bit last time, that the CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, they're kind of a product of this behaviorist paradigm.
Yes,
right?
yes. It's
Where,
really, I think that it's really the upgrade. I mean, like, it's really the Skinner's behaviorism 2.0, you know, and it's really what comes down to is the question of consciousness and free will, whether, you know, we have something called consciousness or freedom. And the behaviorists, you know, and those who are behind, you know, CBDC, they are denying there is such thing as free will, and that they are, you know, yeah, they are saying that we don't have a consciousness, or some might be admit that there is something like consciousness, but they reduce consciousness to look at it as a byproduct of a brain, you know. So it's not, there's nothing, there's no such thing as a soul or spiritual beings. And then actually the spokesperson for this techno-religion is the Israeli historian Yuval Harari, who I quoted in my article. He basically says that there is no such thing as soul. There's, you know, human beings are not spiritual beings, and that we don't have free will. And just as we invented God, you know, free will is, you know, something that human beings just invented it. So, and, you know, he basically said, God is dead. It's just a matter of getting rid of his dead body, right? So it's a interesting thing. So some of the things that he had spoken, and I see him as really the spokesperson for this new technocratic vision, you know? So, so we need to have the alternative vision to articulate, you know, I think the Bitcoiners need to actively articulate what it means to be human.
right.
And then, you know, start creating that vision, you know, instead of like fighting against them, but by creating the alternative, we will win this competition. And this is, ultimately, this is a free market competition. That's how I see it. But it's not, what is at stake is not just the freedom or privacy. It goes much deeper. It concerns the future of humanity, and that's what Bitcoiners are engaged in. So I think this is something that I personally feel strongly that this is very important, and that one hand we have technology like Bitcoin, but it's really the human beings. What we do with the technology would decide, the future of humanity.
Yeah, indeed. I'm reminded of, there's a great YouTube video called, I forget the name of it. It might be Killing the Mind, or it talks about mass psychosis and totalitarianism. But towards the end of that video, and I'll try to put it in the show notes, it describes viable resistance strategies to totalitarianism. Highest among them is this idea of developing parallel systems, right? Where you can just opt out of the system entirely and just not participate. And so we kind of have this strange paradigm where the central bank digital currency seems to be a money that's being or intends to be instrumentalized for social engineering, right? As you said, in China, we already have social credit score. If you say the wrong thing or buy the wrong thing or talk to the wrong people, they turn off your money selectively to punish you and to engineer you, basically, right?
Exactly, right.
And Bitcoin obviously is something that is not possible with. So you've got CBDC empowering social engineering, maybe Bitcoin enabling something much more like self-actualization, which is clearly outside of the behaviorist paradigm.
Exactly,
and it seems like the big battle here is, it's like we've created this, it's a new forum for the human imagination, the internet, right? The digital landscape, whatever it is. And now I think what's really coming into the foreground for me is like, you see established powers fighting to control the narrative in that new space.
Correct.
So that's this whole great reset, we have to reimagine everything. They even use the word imagine,
right?
But
definitely.
it's the root. So authority, right? We often talk about authority. Well, the root word of authority is author.
Yes.
So it's like these CBDCs are trying to be used to author people's stories, whereas Bitcoin lets you be, engaged in like a self-authoring process.
Right, you become like the author. Yes.
And this is just to read one piece from one excerpt from your piece here. In Harari's view, and Yuval Harari is the author of the book *Sapiens*, which is actually a really good book. Which is about narratives, which is about exactly what we're talking about. But it seems like he's kind of gone to the dark side here, being the advisor to Klaus Schwab. Harari says that human beings are no longer mysterious spiritual souls. Instead, they have become hackable animals.
Correct.
It's very concerning to read that.
Right. And what's interesting about this, it's good that you brought up about this narrative control, because as I see it, Yuval Harari, his role in this is that, he kind of is a prophet, like considered to be a prophet, warning humanity about what is going to happen. This rise of technology and the machine world, and how the human will be basically enslaved by the machines. And he's kind of warning us, right, saying we got to do something about this. And then if you actually listen to some of his talks and interviews, and then I actually last night watched one of his interviews, he's not, I personally maybe don't necessarily like him, but he's kind of likable. He has kind of a personality that is accessible to people. And so he's not like considered to be like an evil person, like trying to do this, but he's just a warning, right? He's informing us about this. But what I found interesting is that I think that he's like a spokesperson, and he is presenting the programs, right? So here are the programs. And then now we need to collaborate together and to fight against this. So resist this technocratic takeover, or the machine takeover, right? And what's interesting is that, this has been the patterns, I think, of the elite, is that, they try to use the electoral politics, electoral arena, or engage the public in the semblance of democracy by controlling narratives. So, instead of maybe moving toward a total dictatorship, and enslave everybody and using the brutal force to move toward a dystopic society, I'm actually saying that maybe the way past toward a dystopic society would be more like soft way of, more subversive way of control, and which is that someone like Harari would articulate the programs, and then actually without showing the real choice, the real alternative, which I think Bitcoin present and the Bitcoiners are aware of, that Harari basically is saying this is inevitable. We cannot do anything about this. We have to accept the fact that technology or machine would have this much power. Then what we can do to mitigate its adverse consequences, right? So he is already putting us in a compromised position, and then make us engage in this. I would expect that there would be a slogan of something like, "We all in this together." Whether it's a climate change or racial issues or anything, or pandemic, everything like that. They try to try to articulate programs, and then engage us with the efforts to bring out solutions that they came up with, right? So that's how I see it. And then that, basically what I see is that their vision really is it's the machine takeover, and that the human beings will cease to exist as spiritual beings or beings with autonomous feeling and thought, and this is exactly something that Julian Assange of WikiLeaks pointed out. He was right about this. He earlier describes the defining battle is the institution versus individuals, right? So he basically, as a part of notable cypherpunks, he said our battle is not like left versus right, that is politically defined, but it's individual versus state, individual versus institutions. And now, years later, after he said that, he pointed out the defining struggle is whether humans that control machines or the machines that control human beings. And I think he's precise. I mean, he's very correct in saying that. And that's why I think he's basically imprisoned now. Everybody knows that he's in prison without charge for exposing the crime of the US government and engaging in journalism. But I don't think that's the only reason why he was sent to prison, because he knew about this battle and what's gonna, and if he was allowed to speak, then he would be engaging the public in this struggle. So yeah,
it makes a lot of sense that individuals that are throwing light on the real problem that sort of undermines those that would push narratives, right? They're introducing a narrative as a solution, but if you undermine the very introduction of that narrative by saying, hey, this whole thing is a game being played in your imagination, it sort of short circuits the whole effort.
Exactly.
And I like this point on soft control, because it is this, I often call this the moralistic camouflage.
Yes.
We have the ESG to save the world.
Right.
I'm sure CBDCs will be introduced to save the economy. It's always done for our safety, right? Even the lockdowns and all these other things. It's there never seems to be an instance where government takes an action that they don't say it's in your best interest.
Right.
But it is almost always the exact opposite of in your best interest.
Right. And it's kind of enticing. It's seductive. The narrative is seductive, and so that the people just engage with it. But once you engage, you would lose, because that's you are put in a compromised position. You are deprived of real choice, right?
Yes.
It's you're going to engage with a solution that somebody else came up with. So that's the whole point. And I think that's why Bitcoiners have to articulate the choice, the real choice that we have, and we cannot just compromise, So
Yeah, the Assange point is good too, because there, this goes back to Ayn Rand and all the libertarian philosophers, that there's always been a struggle between the individual
Right.
and collectives, right? Or
Yes.
groups, whatever you want to call these things.
Right.
And Bitcoin's very interesting in that way, that it's kind of like the first collective, if we want to call it that. It's a decentralized organization.
Yes.
But it's optimized for the individual. So
Yes.
that's what makes it so interesting. It's we've
Right.
always had the need to organize ourselves, which required some social constructs.
Right.
But then the people in power within those social constructs tend to become corrupt or bend the rules to their own favor over time at the expense of others. And then, that compromises the integrity of these social structures and they collapse. It's kind of the game or the dynamic we've been caught in. But Bitcoin, again, is so interesting in that it's the first collective or organization that we have that just has rules that can't be bent or broken. And they're optimized for the individual. So it's sort of bridged the gap, I think, between the individual and the collective, which is super interesting.
And I think that's why I think the Bitcoin is a magical internet of money, that it's kind of, solved the paradox, I mean, in some ways, because it allows us to be absolutely individual, right? The fundamentally individual, and without sacrificing ourselves, we can actually come to consensus. Like we can actually create harmony, right? And in the existing system, it's like, in order to create social harmony, we have to sacrifice. We have to give up our individuality, right? We have to conform to the collective, and that has been kind of the only way that was available. And now we have a new system where being individual does not harm the need of a collective, right? And actually, we have to be individual. We have to be sovereign so that we can actually bring value to the collective. So it's an interesting, certainly interesting phenomenon that is happening. Definitely it's a new paradigm that never existed before.
Yeah, almost like we could maybe say that Bitcoin is the first social consensus based purely on consent.
Yeah,
all these other the social consensus of anything that, the US Constitution even, which is something that's been a great tool for liberty. But it took a lot of coercion to get it in place, right? There was war and et cetera. So, Bitcoin's quite mind-bending in that way. I do want to read this excerpt, a longer excerpt from your piece that includes a quote from Yuval. So you wrote, with a view that animals and human beings can be reducible to algorithms, Yuval aims to replace intuition and inner feelings of individuals with mechanical processing.
Yes.
Yuval Harari explained how feelings are not some metaphysical quality that God gave us, but simply biochemical processes of calculations. Calling them biochemical algorithms, Harari noted, and now this is his quote. He said, "What scientists and engineers are telling us more and more is that if we only have enough data and enough computing power, we can create external algorithms that understand humans and their feelings much better than humans can understand themselves.
Right.
And once you have an algorithm that understands you and your feelings better than you understand yourself, that's when authority shifts away from humans to algorithms."
Yes.
This mechanistic, reductionist, materialist, behaviorist paradigm just is really ugly when taken to its extremes. You start to discount the autonomy and sovereignty and individuality of every living person. You start, they're just they're just an algorithm, right? Like a deterministic process, I guess.
Exactly. Right.
And then you develop, if you look at humans in that way or life in that way, then you almost automatically develop this hubris of like, they're just deterministic processes. We can pull this lever, press this button, and change the outcomes. Exactly. But that is totally ignorant of complex reality, right? if we have learned nothing else as human beings, every time we
Right, right.
intervene, we think we're
Mhm.
going to do one thing, we create this
Right.
cascade of unintended consequences.
Yes.
Yet that lesson does not seem to stick.
Yes, definitely. And I think that, as I see it, that they are, transhumanist or technologist, or, they are trying to reinvent, trying to create a new universe, and we hear this Facebook launching this metaverse, right? So then people are getting into this virtual reality, but it's actually goes much bigger than this. And that they are, yeah, they are basically creating the new universe, and then human beings will be, ordinary human beings would be subjected to the technological control. And for instance, the Harari talks about the authority now, shift from human beings to technology, human beings to data. And he says the techno-religion is about data religion. And then what that means is that, nowadays, like the Amazon, tells you that they would recommend the books to read, for instance, right? Saying, oh, Robert, I know which books that you read, and then now, these are the good books for you. And that's one thing. But, he's basically saying that in the future, it's get to the point where we would ask, algorithms for the answers for our decisions, like who to marry, what kind of jobs we should get, and we should just ask Amazon, that correct data. And they know more about ourselves because they collect all the data, right? And then with this biometric tools that that goes under our skin, that record what's happening with our blood pressure, or what's happening inside ourselves, that they know how we get excited when we read certain books, or when we meet certain people, or so they basically would know us inside out. And so we would not have a privacy at all, right? I mean, it would go to the next level. And so basically, so the shift of authority from human beings to algorithms, I mean, and what it does is that, I would just give you an example, like we have something like intuition, right? And that sometimes, like that you have this plan, like you have to go to work, let's say, and you have you already always follow the same path. But sometimes, like, you feel like, what, I just feel like I wanted to kind of go to a different path today. Like, you probably had that kind of experience, right? Or like, I need to stop at this bookstore, or I need to just do something else. And when you listen to intuition, you meet someone that you never expected, and that would transform your life, or you meet the love of your life, or something like that, right? And then that's when that kind of magic or synchronistic event happen when you follow your intuition. Like, Joseph Campbell said, follow your bliss, right? So there are things that I think guide our actions that are not just simply logical or reason, based, right? Something that we feel, we don't understand why, but we just followed it, and then something happened. And I think what this technological control or algorithmic control or whatever, would do is that it would shut that down, shut our connection to that intuition, that something vital that guide us, and then so that we have to follow what the Google map says. The Google would give you, okay, these are the things, that these are the paths that you have to take to work. And if you're trying to go away from that, the Google would say, oh, no, you have to keep going, So and so as I see it, what it does is that it's creates a universe where human beings cannot act freely, cannot trust, or cannot follow our feelings or intuition, right? And everything will be mechanically controlled, right? And then algorithm is based on deterministic sequence, obviously, something that we have done based on our actions that have been already taken place. So it's the past dictating future, if you think about it, right? So there is no possibility for future that is independent from the past. And then it deprives of our potent capacity for creativity, because creativity is something that, that something happens, like that goes outside of time and space, perhaps, or a linear sense of a time, and then something comes that is completely paradigm shift or earth shattering or something that never existed before. That comes when we connect with this creative force. But if the algorithmic determinism always keeps us in what we have already done, what we have thought of, what we have felt about, then we cannot actually exercise our power over creativity, right? So it has a deep consequence, because human beings are no longer creative beings, and we will be just simply repeating what we've already done. It's just repeating the past. And then algorithms can control us more and more, because they will collect the data of what we have done, and then put us in a loop cycle of past informing the present, and then the present informing the future. But it's a kind of a closed circle, if you see, right? And then what Bitcoin does is that Bitcoin open up open the cracks in this loop, so give us alternatives, so that we can exercise inspiration, imagination, and then we can live in the present moment, or we can enter into the present moment where the real potent creative power exists. And then we can create the present moment out of imagination, rather than past just informing us, and then we become just simply repeating what we have already done.
Yeah, it makes so much sense that it's part of learning, I guess, that we obviously we experience life, we take in experience itself, we are coding, right? Memories, heuristics, rules of thumb,
right.
things, ways to be in that situation. When you're in a similar situation again, you can apply yourself in a better way. So there's some utility in the memories, right? And the structuring, the habits, the routines, all of that. But you can't get locked into those patterns purely, because then you're unable to learn, right? You need to have experimentation. You need to follow your intuition at times. This is where a lot of the great discoveries and innovations have come from.
Exactly.
And so, and again, there's something here related to that behaviorist paradigm, where they think that, everything's reducible to data, basically, or it's computable. But we know that there are uncomputable aspects to reality. That's the other weird thing about this, is science. If you really follow science to the bottom, get into something like the quantum domain, there are plenty of uncomputable, purely probability-based situations, right? You can't reduce it to an algorithm or reduce it to a number. So it's a strange thing, right? It's almost like our thinking hasn't actually caught up to where science actually is today. We're still kind of stuck in this Newtonian paradigm, almost like the clockwork universe, and we're all just machines. And
well, and then materialistic scientists, ultimately they see consciousness as a byproduct of the brain. It's a chemical activities and interaction inside the brain, and there is nothing that they don't see the consciousness actually precedes a brain, right? So that's a new paradigm. So materialistic scientists cannot accept. But there is, brain and head-based thinking or intelligence is just one part of intelligence. That we have intelligence of the heart, we have intelligence of the stomach. Like we have gut feeling. So that our stomach, the gut has intelligence, right? Tell us like what not eat, or all of that stuff. So I think that this whole kind of heavy reliance on head-based science, so to speak, confined us in this one narrow kind of spectrum of reality or intelligence, right? We have to depend on this rational reason, the brain-based thinking, but we are much more than that. Obviously that this brain-based thinking has a utility to it. I mean, there's no way that we need this, right? It gives us information, and we can learn, and we can have memory and all of that stuff. But like you're saying, we should not be just confined, restricted to that faculty. We should be able to embrace all the aspects of ourselves and all forms of intelligence, right? So that's, I think, the part of Bitcoin Renaissance 2.0 is to embrace all that is human, and the Bitcoin is allowing us to do that.
Yeah, and I guess we often say thinking with the head versus feeling with the heart, or gut instinct. We describe these things as if they're real, but I just learned this a few years ago. They actually are real, right? There's actual neurons in your heart.
Yes,
there's neurons in your gut.
Yes.
There's a lot more in your brain, but they're different levels of knowing, right? And we've all experienced it probably at some point in our lives.
Right.
Your head's telling you one thing, your heart's telling you another, and you have to work it out.
Right.
And all of this,
it is scientifically actually observable and studied. There is, the science has been showing that the heart has generate electromagnetic field that is much larger than the brain, and that can be actually detected. So, it's not just, the ancient mystics talked about heart, right? Like Rumi or poet, that they talked about the intelligence of the heart. And then, but somehow like scientists just see that as like a mysticism, but it's not. It can be scientifically proven. The heart has intelligence.
Yes, yeah. And all of this.
Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, CrowdHealth. CrowdHealth is a Bitcoin-enabled alternative to legacy health insurance. Now let's face it, legacy health insurance is an absolute scam. Nobody can explain this better than the legendary comedian Chris Rock.
Insurance. You got to have some insurance. You got to. There's an insurance. They shouldn't even call it insurance. They should just call it in case shit. And I give a company some money in case shit happens. Now, if shit don't happen, shouldn't I get my money back?
So with CrowdHealth, instead of just paying premiums that you'll never see again, you can hold part of this pool of savings in dollars and in Bitcoin through CrowdHealth. And when you have a health event, you can draw against this pool of communal savings. So go to joincrowdhealth.com/breedlove to learn more or sign up. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Wasabi Wallet. Wasabi lets you use Bitcoin privately while still maintaining full control over your money. Specifically, Wasabi Wallet is an open source, non-custodial wallet with privacy built in by default. By using Wasabi, you're effectively putting the private back in private property. Wasabi Wallet is an easy-to-use privacy wallet that can support any amount of Bitcoin transactions. So go to wasabiwallet.io today to download this state-of-the-art wallet software. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Swan Private. Swan Private is a concierge financial services firm based in Los Angeles. Now, I've known the Swan team for years, and these guys are laser focused on the Bitcoin mission. They even have a zero tolerance policy for all shitcoining. Recently, their CEO, Corey Clipston, was instrumental in calling out many of these crypto scams right before they collapsed, saving a lot of people a lot of money in the process. Swan Private focuses on guiding high net worth individuals and businesses on all aspects of Bitcoin strategy, including buying, custodying, and market research. This concierge service provides you direct access to a private advisor by text, phone, or email. So go to swanprivate.com/breedlove today to sign up. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Masterworks. Masterworks gives you access to the fine art market at more affordable price points. They do this by offering you fractional shares in their $500 million portfolio of fine art. Now, fine art is an alternative asset class, and historically, it's been a great performer and a really good hedge against inflation. Most investors typically hold anywhere from 2 to 10% of their assets in an asset like fine art. To sign up or learn more, go to masterworks.com and use promo code BREEDLOVE. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Casa. Casa makes it simple to buy and secure your Bitcoin without wondering whether you're doing it right. Specifically, Casa provides a multi-key custody solution, which is by far the most secure way to custody your Bitcoin. Now, when I talk about Bitcoin being theft-proof money or inviolable private property, a multi-key custody model is exactly what I am talking about. Using multiple keys lets you maintain full control of your Bitcoin while also giving you redundancy in case you lose one of the keys. It's also the best way to secure your Bitcoin for inheritance planning purposes. So go to keys.casa, that's C-A-S-A, today to sign up and use discount code BREEDLOVE.
And all of this
makes me wonder too, because I've often described money as our most important technology. It has kind of a hybrid technology plus psychotechnology aspect, and where a technology is something more like a physical laptop, a
Right.
psychotechnology being something more like literacy or numeracy or rhetoric, even like it's a cognitive software, basically.
Right.
Money is kind of both in a way, right? Because it tends to be rooted in physical reality, like gold was, but then we also think in prices. So it kind of has both of these qualities. And so I'm always curious, like well, I guess one of the things I'm really trying to zero in on with the show and with my work is how much do changes in the character of the monetary technology influence changes in our mind, right? They're linked together. And so I wonder how much of a reciprocity there is between the two. And I'll read another excerpt here from your piece. You wrote that central bank digital currency is a type of programmable new money capable of tracking, monitoring, and controlling the flow of transactions. China has become the leading edge of its development. They have applied it to the creation of a social credit scoring program, a system of moral ranking that controls the behavior of citizens.
Right.
Some see the ultimate goal of the rollout of CBDCs as being to program people like central bank digital currencies. Humanity can now be reinvented in the image of the machine to act as automatons like robots without feeling. And so it's just interesting to me that we're talking about just using two different tools for the same job, right? One is a form of money that people can inject their agenda, or they can program, right? They can program the money to try and engineer social outcomes.
Right.
Whereas the other form of money, like Bitcoin, is immune to that engineering, the social engineering aspects. So what you're really doing is just giving maximal power and autonomy to the individual user.
Right.
And so Bitcoin would seem to empower and enable self-organization, which is what we observe in nature, by the way, right? There's not a lot of apes social engineering one another, right? They self-organize into tribes or whatever they call them. A group of apes, I don't know what it's called. Versus in the CBDC world, we do have human apes trying to inject their agenda in ways that can influence the behavior of other human apes towards their ends. So it's this weird, it's almost like CBDCs allow one group of humans to make other humans a means to an end.
Right.
Yeah, subhuman.
They will create a new class, right? New class, and then you're right. So they are trying to create, and they are trying to give power to technology. So in the sense that the God becomes
making technology a god, yes.
Right. And then the humans will be reduced to like animal, kind of like animal level, right? Hackable animals, as you know, Harari says it. So it's really, I mean, using money as a social contract basically, and then deploying it by using game theory, you know, and then their game is, you know, using these narratives and taking advantage of this pretense of democracy, you know, which many people still believe that, you know, especially people in the West believe that they live in a democratic society, right? So using that to manipulate us, you know, exploit our empathy and creating these narratives that speak to us and make us feel good, and so that we will be sucked in and we would adapt their currencies. And I think it's a good thing. You know, we have to do this. We have to do this together to save humanity or whatever. But actually, that plan is very anti-human. You know, it's based on the anti-humanistic vision, in my opinion. And then Bitcoin provides, because Bitcoin, by removing central control, it's, I think, align us to who we are, you know, as just, you know, naturally as who we are, right? And the law of nature, basically, underlying law of nature. And what's interesting is that these people who want to control, whether that's B.F. Skinner or, you know, the transhumanist, they want to kind of undermine the laws of nature. You know, they are principles and laws that control us, like govern us, right? And that's precede human-made law, so to speak, like legal laws, right? And I think that the central planners, they actually want to take that power, like they want to be the god. So they will create their man-made laws and try to override the laws of nature, which it's really not possible. I mean, it creates the illusion that that's possible, but it's not really inherently possible,
Yeah, the fear is used a lot, right, to corral humans into these systems of control. So it's engaging
right?
human nature in a negative way, and that you want
Yes,
trying to create fear in people so that they're easier to move,
right.
It's
Yes,
easier to
yes,
present a solution when people are scared or there's a
right.
lot of uncertainty, etc.
Exactly, right.
Whereas Bitcoin's approaching human nature from just the opposite tact.
Mhm.
Is that, basically it's an acknowledgement of, I don't like this term free will because it's hotly debated, but people obviously have the ability to control themselves and decide what they're going to do. I mean, you could
Right.
argue that even that's deterministic, but we can't predict it, right? You can't look at a human and say, oh, these are the actions they're going to take for the rest of their life. So even if free will is an illusion and their life is deterministic, it's impenetrable to us. We can't see it.
Right,
So
right.
Bitcoin is like acknowledging the humble place we should be coming from in the face of complex reality. It's like, we can't know what will happen. So here is a system that honors your individual capabilities and power to deal with an uncertain future, honors every individual's.
Right.
And in that approach, it's actually making us collectively the most resistant to the future, right? We can create more wealth, more division of labor, more civilization, ultimately.
Exactly. And I think what Satoshi did, in my opinion, is that basically to construct the decentralized system, right? And to remove levers of control. And I think that, he or she recognized and kind of respected, I think, the laws of nature, or to realize that there are something higher that governs us, each person, actually, each person universally, but at the same time at the individual level. And we trust that, we trust that each person has an ability to know what is right for themselves and the ability to self-determine their own lives. And that I am willing to let go of that control, control over another fellow man or woman, and that, I think, is a very significant thing, because in the sense that, to recognize that there is something, working in us, and that it's not us to judge whether it's working correctly for someone and it doesn't work correctly for someone, and we have someone intervene and then fix it or something, but to trust that, okay, everybody is basically governed by wisdom, wisdom of the laws of nature, you know what I mean? And that so it allow each person to connect with that wisdom inside themselves. And somehow when we start to do that at the individual level and come together collectively and form a network, like you were saying, it creates a very resilient, powerful, network, and then nobody is controlling anyone. It's just
self-organizing.
Everybody is bound by laws of nature, which we actually are. Without, whether we know or not, since we are born, everybody is subjected to laws of gravity. Nobody can go above it, right? I mean, nobody can stop the law of gravity from working and act as like they are immune from it. No, everybody is affected by that. So whether we know or not, we are all bound by laws of nature, and I think the Bitcoin now, I think for the first time in human history, perhaps, allow us to recognize that, and then allow each person to choose to align, him or herself with that, underlying basically principles, fundamental principles. And it's really up to each person to choose it,
Yeah, no, it's super well said. The paper that's coming up in my mind right now is The Use of Knowledge in Society by Hayek. And he just describes, it does a beautiful job of explaining how knowledge has kind of this spatial and temporal relevance, you know, so local actors, like people on the scene, right? When things happen, they have knowledge that they can act upon right then and there that is much more efficient for that individual to do that rather than pass that knowledge into some bureaucratic system, wait for it to go all the way up the chain of command and come all the way back down with a decision and then tell you what you should do. And by then the information may not be relevant at that point.
Right.
So that would be kind of CBDC world, right? Where everything, all the knowledge and subsequent decision-making is being fed through the bureaucratic chain of command. Whereas Bitcoin world is just saying, no, let each individual make their own decisions and incur the consequences of those actions, those decisions.
Exactly.
That's the system that's constantly calibrating itself with the most information and most feedback to make us most adapted to the world, which is that's the whole point, right? As we're saying, we're trying as a species, trying to become better fit for survival on this planet.
Right. Yes. Right. So I think that, you know, the people who are trying to de-engineer the fiat system, you know, or the fiat mindset is that they want to control, they want to govern other person, you know, and they want to save other people, right? So in a sense that, again, they want to exercise control. And then like someone like Skinner, I mean, he probably believed in what he was doing. He didn't think that he was doing something, you know, harmful. I think he truly believes in what he was doing was to maybe save humanity or whatever, right? So, but that's like their system is that there's something wrong outside, and then like, you know, they have to control and fix things, you know. Whereas the Bitcoin, you know, each person will save him or herself. Nobody's saving anyone, you know. It's each person doing it, you know. So that's the difference, I think, different model, you know.
Yeah, it's a great point, because even these guys, Yuval Harari and all the World Economic Forum people, they probably think they're saving the world too.
Exactly,
you know,
right. Yeah,
from their
exactly.
unlimited paradigm.
Yes.
And who are we? But you know, like, who are we to say whether they're right or wrong necessarily? But what we do have the power to say is no. Right, like, no, that doesn't work for me. No. I'll pass.
Exactly.
Someone else can eat the bugs. Someone else cannot have the property and be happy. I'm gonna do this. You know, that's right for me.
Exactly.
So
exactly. And I think that from a bigger perspective, if we zoom out, I think that humanity collectively are going through some kind of rite of passage. You know, we are, you know, in the process of evolving ourselves, and then for that, we need to have a choice. You know, if we don't have a real choices, right, then we cannot actually claim our own freedom. So I think the CBDC, you know, people who are trying to roll out CBDCs, they are presenting as a choice, and they are, you know, engaged in competition. So I think there's a purpose in doing that, you know, for them to exist, in my opinion. So I don't consider them as like, oh, that's, you know, we should fight against them. No, I think it's like what's happening is as perfect as it is. Everything is just, you know, how it should happen. That we now have the real choices, you know. Yeah.
You could probably sum it up with just that, as Bitcoin's giving people more choices, right? And that you don't have to get on board with whatever narrative or system is being forced upon you. You now have a way to opt out.
Yeah.
I'll read one more excerpt here. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I mean, and also I think that Bitcoin is actually reviving the free market. You know, that it's a real test whether we are going to have free market or not. You know, if we don't have a choice, if we cannot make choices, we don't have free market. So, and also it shows what free market can do, right? So that's why I think it's like excitement experiment.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, I'll read one more excerpt here. You wrote, Satoshi Nakamoto, the unknown person or group behind Bitcoin, made manifest the cypherpunk's moral value by writing code that can defend the freedom of individuals. Satoshi, by launching Bitcoin as a community-driven free software project, let go of control over the technology. In this act, a creator of Bitcoin transferred the authority to each human being and then disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of a mere promise of redemption, Satoshi delivered us a path via proof of work. Here, the creator lets us all engage in the work of salvation, a process of validating truth on our own, proving that we human beings are made in the image of God. Now, I think you and I probably have similar views on, well, at least we probably don't view God as the guy in the sky, as many people do. So could you just unpack, this is a very powerful closing excerpt here. Could you just unpack that a little bit for us, and what is the connection you're making to God here? And I guess it'd help to have you somewhat, I know this is very difficult to do, but somewhat describe the conceptualization of God you had in mind when you wrote this.
Okay, so Yuval Harari talks about how before, like, we had this God, God figure or religions, right? And then we externalized authorities onto these kind of entities, deities, and then there is a shift that happened from that kind of religion, the influence of religion, to constitutional republic, perhaps the move toward democracy, representative democracy. And then, so that the premise of democracy is that each person, has a way of knowing, in a sense, that each person, instead of like trusting God or religion, that it's up to the individual. Like each person can know what is right and wrong. And because of the fact, like in the U.S., for instance, there is the founding fathers made sure that there has to be the wall of separation between the state and church, and that they did not want to create a church state. Like they wanted to basically give individuals rights and ability to decide what is right for them. And then now the Harari is basically pointing that now authority is going back to again this external God, but it's not the God, the religious God, but at this time it's technology. And I think, when I wrote this, I agree with Harari's assessment that first, that, we externalized our authority onto, metaphysical entities like God or religions. And then that moved, the society moved from monarchy to democratic system, so that somehow the source of legitimacy is placed upon the individual. And that was the significance of the creation of the US Constitution, for instance, or as an example of democratic systems. But the next step, that's where I strongly disagree with Harari, is that now with Bitcoin, the source of legitimacy is for the first time placed in the individual. So the US Constitution, or the US, the representative democracy as it was designed initially, it was a good idea, but it has not really lived up to its potential, or it hasn't really realized what it set out to do. And that ultimately, for me, when I use the term God, it's individual, basically. It's the God, whatever the externalized authority that we give power to, that God is now descending into the heart of each human being, so that we become a part of God. And I don't mean that when I say like we become part of God, like we become God, like, to control other people, or, to exercise the omnipotence or whatever, like not like the arrogant way of, like we are almighty, but we recognize ourselves as part of divine, or as part of something larger that connects all of us as species, as other human beings, and that there is no separation between this, the external authority or God or each person. So the word God is very kind of, it's a weighted word, like some people have major, knee-jerk reaction to it. But I don't mean as like the religious God, but I mean as the source of legitimacy is being placed upon the individual, that we become the author. Each person becomes the author of his or her own lives, and that authorship, that's what I mean as God. That now we can claim that authorship, and that we don't have to externalize that power onto other people or other, or deities, Christian God or Jesus Christ or Buddha or whatever the gods that are out there. So it's more kind of in a secular way. It's us. We each person has divine spark in us, and that each person can verify our own truth, what is right for us, and that we don't have to trust any religious authorities, we don't have to trust politicians, we don't have to trust bankers, we don't have to trust anybody, basically, that we have a way of verifying what is right. So so from that perspective, it's a different, just because I used the term God, it's nothing really related to, these kind of religious
not theological so much. It's more
right,
philosophical or maybe metaphysical, the way you're using it, I guess.
Right.
And this, when you look at the whole human enterprise, like, the beginning to now, all the systems we've been creating, like the grand arc or the direction, the trajectory has been towards more power to the people, right?
Yes.
We've moved away from ancient Egyptian pharaoh god kings,
right,
where all the power is vested in a couple of people at most, and then everyone else is basically a slave, to something more like liberal democracies, right, where everyone is supposed to be sovereign, although there's obviously the system doesn't work as advertised, but at least it's better. It's better than 5,000 years ago, 7,000 years ago in Egypt.
It was definitely a huge step. It was an improvement and progress.
Yes.
And then Bitcoin will actually fully realize that. I think I really believe that Bitcoin fully realized the ideals in the Declaration of Independence. The ideals that funded the United States,
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going with that, is Bitcoin is just a furtherance of that same trajectory, right? It's the ultimate power to the people.
I think that if funding funds are alive today, and if they see Bitcoin, that they would be, many of them, like Thomas Jefferson, would be overjoyed, that he would think that here comes, the real fulfillment of, the promise. And that, that's how I see it.
Yeah, agreed completely. Well, Nozomi, this is another great piece. I hope you continue writing. I really enjoyed talking to you about this as well. Could you please let my audience know where they can find out more about you or your work?
Okay, so the best way to find out my work is my Twitter, which is Nozomi Imagine. That's the account name. And then also, I'm actually launching my own podcast with my fellow Bitcoiner, Roger 9000. He's a London-based musician, and it's called Bitcoin is Love, Renaissance 2.0. So the reason why I created this is that I wanted to amplify the vibe of love and Renaissance 2.0. So I think we need to kind of engage in our efforts to create and define what it means to be human, as an antidote to this dark forces or the WEF's agendas, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I'm really glad you're starting your own pod too. That's super cool.
Yes.
These aspects of Bitcoin that are not discussed enough, the personal transformation and whatnot. It's very fascinating to me, and I hope people get value out of this.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming on, and we'll do this again soon.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.